Starting our new series on how do I worship. Some of you may not know, but I've played in worship bands for longer than I've been a pastor. Played guitar, played bass. So worship has always been important to me. Music has always had a special place to me in my heart because of growing up with it. My dad was a musician, my grandpa was a musician, and probably beyond that too. We all played. I remember some of my earliest memories of music with my family is, my dad sitting there and playing hair metal band stuff at the table, and my grandpa playing Johnny Cash, and just these types of things, just sitting around with guitars and the family, and even in high school, I remember sitting around with friends, and one of my friends had a studio, and doing music in the studio and stuff like that. Like, music has always been important. But I think we overlook the importance of worship so many times in our daily lives. We agree that worship is important on Sunday morning. Like, if you came in this morning, if you had never been here before and you came in, and there was absolutely no music, you would probably think, that was strange. Right? I mean, I would. I'd be like, why is there no music? I've been in churches, had a friend that he did a worship series, and what they did is they did their announcements, they did their offering, they did their sermon, and then they did the music afterwards. Because he was trying to emphasize the importance, and I was like, that would be strange, right? You'd be like, this is not right. Like, we've kind of grown accustomed to the way that even if it's a non-traditional church, there's still supposed to be, some talking, say hi, there's supposed to be some music, and there's supposed to be some preaching, and probably some music again. Like that, if you go into 90% of churches, if it's with instruments or not, there's usually music. So, worship is important, but I think we overlook the importance of it. One of the biggest things that worship can do is it can actually help set the tone for everything else that happens that day, that week. But it depends on the person. Some people may not like music at all. Does anyone in here turn the radio off when they drive and they have no radio on at all? My grandmother does. So I'm not saying it's strange, my grandmother does. It was always the most awkward car rides as a kid because you're sitting there in the dead silence. You're like, what is this? So I'm used to my dad, and the radio's like up, and windows are shaking. But we all view music differently. And that's why it's important to know that worship is not just music, because that's what we normally refer to it as. There's actually a definition of worship I want to share, and just to help us all be on the same page. Worship is the feeling or expression of reverence and adoration. Now, if you're like me, I grew up in a small little hillbilly town, and reverence and adoration weren't really necessarily words we use on a regular basis. So that is a deep feeling of love and respect. Because I don't know anyone that's just like, I just have great adoration for this. Like, that's not part of a normal vocabulary anymore. It's not wrong if you do. Some of you probably have much greater vocabularies than me. But it's a feeling or expression of deep love and respect. That is worship. So, I think we could see how we could worship other things besides God. You have a deep love and adoration for music, all kinds of music. You can actually come to where you worship the music itself and not God. You can have a deep love and respect for sports. Sports is when it's at. My dad jokes around and says they go to the early service at their church in South Carolina. I think it's at 9 or 9:30. He's like, but the football game doesn't start till noon. We're home. Like the NASCAR races doesn't start till noon or later. We're home in time. It's like we go to one of those NASCAR churches. We get out on time to get back to the house. So we can have a deep love and respect for different things other than God. Because I think we usually think of worship like if you're going to have a worship, you have to bow down to it, right? And if you're like me, I've always kind of said I have a problem with bowing down. Like, I bow down to no man. Like, I bow down to nothing besides God. Like, nothing else. But if we actually looked at our schedules, we looked at our pocketbooks, and we looked at what we do with our free time and our spare time, what do we worship? Do we worship, all these other things, and God's just, we worship Him on Sunday morning, and He gets His hour, but then, you got 15, 20 hours of TV time. Or, you don't open this book unless it's Sunday morning. But and I'm not saying you can't have an ebook. That's perfectly fine. I use an electronic version of the Bible 90% of the time because it's always in my pocket or it's always on my desk. It's usually near me. But we can look at the Bible and we have greater access to the Bible than ever in history. And I think we probably look at it less than ever in history, especially as Christians. So worship can be defined in a few different ways, but that's the actual definition from Webster's Dictionary. Online, of course, because I don't have a hard copy of that. I don't know if they still make them, but I have it from online. For those that don't know what Webster's Dictionary is, it says books you used to go to the library to get and find out, like, this is what it means. We had one at home. Encyclopedias, they fall in that same category. No one knows what they are anymore. But that's what we're really going to be thinking of. That's the definition of worship. So I want to give you guys an example. Say we're one of those, we're a trendy church or we're a trendy congregation and we don't meet till noon, right? And you've been to these type of places. There's a guy that I know that came here from Kenya, and he was going by, and people were getting there early, 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock. They're showing up early, and they're tailgating and everything. It's the biggest church he's ever seen. They're outside, they're celebrating, they're having fun, and comes to be a little while later, he realizes he's at a football game, and he's not at a church. It's like it's the biggest building in town. Everyone's there. The parking lot's packed. Everyone's celebrating. He's like, they were worshiping. I love football. I'll be the first one to admit it. I know some of you guys aren't fans. That's okay. Go Chiefs. I'll stand behind them even through good and bad seasons, and I'm still a fan, so I'll make it. But there's this place where fan becomes worship. When you're a fan of something, when all you do is think about, all you do is read about. And I have friends that research and they can tell you every football player on the team, and I could probably tell you most of them. They know the players, they know their positions, they know their favorite barbecue restaurant in Kansas City. They know what they know. And we oftentimes can't tell the difference of, when we talked about just a couple months ago, if it's scripture or if it's not scripture. If it's this or if it's that, if it's this important or that important. So we have to really define worship and look at how we worship other things. Because it's easy to worship so many things when they're so readily available. And honestly, because it's what society does, it's normal. No one says it's a bad thing to be a fanatic about football. They got fantasy football, they got football games, jerseys, clothes, whatever. You never look at somebody like, oh, that's that football nut again. Or there's no one that's mad when people are basketball fans. But if you acted the same way in church that you do at a football game, you're going to get some funny looks. Like people holding up signs in church, John 3:16 signs. They got those at football games. Yeah, you got face paint on, and you got the church colors painted on, you're wearing church shirts, and you got jerseys made, they're customized. You even got your own name on the back, and people would think you were insane, right? Like let's be real. I have the custom Chiefs jersey with my name on and stuff. I don't have a Citizens Church shirt, and it's got a big number on it. Number 1, it's or number 2 maybe, I guess. But got to rethink this. But we would think we were insane if that's the way people dress at church. Could you imagine? Church starts at 11 o'clock. People out in the parking lot at 9 o'clock cooking, having fun and talking. People would be like, what kind of church is this? Honestly, how many people do you think would turn in just because they saw that and want to figure out what's going on now? I would, just because I'd be curious, like, what in the world? Hey, free food, But that would be something to see, I think. And that's why I want us to really look at what is worship. Today's focus is that. It's just answering the question, what is worship? Because, like I said, most of us, I think if I ask the majority of Christians, I won't see people in this room even, but majority of Christians, worship is the music you play before a sermon. It's not, it's not music at a concert necessarily. It's not music in this place. I've been to a wide array of concerts, and you'd be surprised of how even rap music can turn into a worship concert in the right setting, in the right context, in the right song. But you would not dare be like, yeah, I'm going to this worship concert with Lecrae or with NF. Like, that's not going to be the people you're thinking of. Like, worship, you're going to think it's, Jesus Culture, Elevation. The bands that actually have, like, worship in their name, like those bands. So worship is what we're going to look at. Because we struggle with it. We struggle with defining it. We struggle with living it out in our own lives. If we were honest, totally honest, if I had a camera here and I said, I'm going to show you guys what you look like during worship, would you want to see it? Would you want to see your faces? How you move, how you act, how you talk, how you sing, or if you're like some, maybe you kind of mumble through some. There's nothing wrong with that. I know a lot of mumblers. My dad's one of them most of the time. It's okay. He'll watch this and he'll tell me about it later. It's all right. But there's mumblers, there's singers, there's clappers, there's, the hands up people, and there's other people who are there. Their pockets in the hand, I don't know what to do. Like, if you've never watched yourself or paid attention to your movements, you're going to these next few weeks. Because I'm going to talk a little bit about worship for the next 4 weeks, so we're going to be thinking about this a little bit more. But worship is more than a song. Worship is also a posture. It's a spiritual posture, and it's a physical posture. I would be inclined to say that most of us do not have a great spiritual or physical posture when it comes to worship. Worship, like I said, sometimes it's just not your song, right? You're like, I don't really like this song. So I'm just going to stand here and wait for it to be over. I don't really like that song either. And I'm saying these things, and I'm not pointing at other people besides myself. Because I have done these things, said these things, acted these things. They're all normal to me in growing up and maturing, where it's like, I don't know the song or I don't like the song. Maybe the person that wrote the song is someone you don't like. We have our reasons. And I know me and Fernand joke around about that because we have two different singers that's like, I just do not like her stuff. I've seen her in concert 3 or 4 different times with a group of people, and every time she had a cold. Or I was sick, and it's just like, I don't know how many times year after year you can be sick at the exact same place. It just makes you wonder, maybe they have to embellish a little bit on record. We have these thoughts that keep us from worshiping. Who here would say that when they're reading the lyrics, that they're really focusing on the lyrics of what you're singing? Or are you thinking, did I leave my stove on? What time's the football game? I'm kind of hungry, what's for lunch? I wonder what we're going to do after church today. I hope my dogs aren't tearing stuff up. Is that my kids running upstairs? Those are all going through our heads probably. So part of worship is being able to focus on that. And I know that's hard if you're like me and your brain runs 1,000 miles an hour and it's on next thing, the next thing, the next thing, the next thing about that fast. Kristen does not ask me, how did you get there? Because when she does, I'll be like, well, you said this, which reminded me of this, and this, and this, and then that's how. It makes perfect sense to me. That's it. So today's key scripture that we're looking at is in Hebrews 12, 25 through 29. It will be on the screen. It's just a very short excerpt from here that we'll look at, and it explains a little bit about worship and what is worship and why we focus on it. Something to know about Hebrews is that it is written to people that had converted to become Christians, that were Jews, and they were afraid of persecution because it hadn't gotten to the point where they were martyrs yet, but they were thinking, I don't know if I want to be this or not. Like, this might cost me my life. So Paul wrote this to them in that time, in that place where they're thinking from. So a lot is talking about the sovereignty of God, his holiness, where he has oneness, where he's up high, he's up above. So that's where he's writing from. He's writing from people who understand the Old Testament, and understand the knowledge that's within the Old Testament. So he's writing some things that you won't see in other books that he writes. So we're going to go ahead and we'll start in verse 25. And it says, see to it that you do not refuse him who is speaking. For if those did not escape when they refused him who warned them on earth, much less will we escape who turn away from him who warns from heaven. And his voice shook the earth then, but now he had promised, saying, yet once more I will shake not only the earth, but also the heaven. This expression, yet once more, denotes the removing of those things which can be shaken, as of created things, so that those things which cannot be shaken may remain. Therefore, since we received a kingdom from which cannot be shaken, let us show gratitude by which we may offer to God acceptable service with reverence. There's that word again. With reverence and awe. Awe's that, that moment where we're like, wow, and your jaw drops. That's awe. In verse 29, good memory verse here if you need to start with some short ones. For our God is a consuming fire. So you have reverence and awe because our God is a consuming fire. That is the key verse portion that we're looking at. And the reason that it's so important that we look at who God is what is worship. Part of what is worship is what do we worship? Are we worshiping, the music itself? Are we worshiping, the curtains and the drapes in the church and the carpet and the chairs and all those things that people usually start arguments about? I've asked some people who've been in church for a while, including some of my family who are pastors, and I asked them, I said, if churches argued so much about carpet and the aesthetics of churches, then why so oftentimes did it have such hideous carpet and chair combinations? Literally, who thought popsicle orange was the perfect color for the carpet? And why do we need maroon everything and all this stuff? It never combining colors. And I am not, we were just talking about this, I'm not an interior decorator. It's not my history or job or any of those things. But I can tell you, maroon and orange or the green, mint green, we've all seen the mint green in plenty of churches, the wood paneling, which was cool at one point, and now it's actually starting to come back. So it can come back around, but these colors did not mix. But we thought about them. Do we worship the building more? That is actually one of my favorite things about being in this building that we have, is that it's obvious that this was not intended to be a church. You don't walk up and think, yeah, I wish my church had a garage door, in the sanctuary. No one's thinking that. No, I don't, there might be a few people that are that'd be really handy when you're doing this or that. But most people are not envious of a garage door. They're not envious of metal walls. But the church building, it's not the church. It is not God. It is not the thing to be worshipped. It's a building. The church is the people that are in it. And God is not confined to a holy of holies anymore. In Scripture, when it says when Jesus died, the curtain was torn. The curtain was what separated God and His holy of holies. It was His separation to the rest of the world, to the rest of the people that came into the tabernacle. So when the curtain was torn, He was around beholder. So, and that's where one of the reasons I struggle with, people feel God's presence in churches only. And I think it's because of where we worship. If you've only come to church, and I think God is in churches. I'm not saying His presence is not there and it cannot be felt. But you can feel God's presence in a car. You can feel God's presence in your house. You can feel it in your neighbor's house. You can feel it outside. I have felt the Spirit in many different places. I still remember one morning I left Kansas City early because I was up there on a weekend insurance training, I believe is what it was. And I was coming back Sunday morning at 4 or 5 a.m. to get it back in time for church. And I think I was north of Clinton, still if you're familiar, it's 13 Highway. And I was north of Clinton, and a song I had played, not just heard, I played probably 1,000 times, and God's Spirit just hit me. I can barely see the road because my eyes are full of tears, and I'm not manly crying because there's no one else in the car who's trying to see. It's I just need to be safe. So get tears out of my eyes. But God's Spirit is not confined to a building. So the first thing that we have to define is what worship is not. Worship is not worshiping the building. We don't, I believe that churches are places to be respected, but they're places to be used. You have to use them for ministry. I know, no one wants their kids running in church. I get that. No one wants to have this happen or that happen. No one wants people to get hurt. I understand all of those things, but churches are meant to be used in places where we can help people and grow. If you worship the building, then that's what becomes the ultimate thing to respect. You respect the building. I see drinks all throughout the sanctuary, and that's what I want. I have a water up here because I'll get dry at some point probably. If you have coffee, one of the great things about having concrete floor, you spill your drink, wipe it up. Carpet, it stains. Then you got to clean it. It's a lot of work. So there are advantages to having a place that's not seen as a traditional church. But if we worship the building, that's what we see. If we worship the music, then you will critique the music till you're dead. Now, I'm not going to ask anyone to raise hands because I'd be raising my hand first. As the son of a musician, I've learned to critique music from a very young age. It's like, hey, this is wrong, this sounds off here, this is what's happening here. The vocals is too loud, the drums is too quiet, the guitar, I can't hear it all. Like, if you're a natural critiquer, you understand. Kind of got to fight to bite your tongue. Kristen, I would drive her crazy when we go somewhere else, and it's like, this was going on, or this is what's wrong. She's like, what's wrong? I'm like, this is this, and this. And you point out. If you worship the music, then you will find what's wrong with the music the whole time instead of focusing on what you're singing about. If we're focusing on God when we're doing the music before a sermon, the song itself, the style, who wrote it, when it was written, probably isn't that important to us. But if we're focusing on how much I enjoy it in my ears, orally, if we're focusing on that, it makes it a little more about us. It makes it easier to worship the music itself. If we worship a lot of the things outside of here, one way you can tell is if you're in church and you're sitting here and I'm speaking, for instance, right now, and you're sitting there thinking about lunch and about the baseball game that's on later and when the NBA playoffs, when's the next game? If you're sitting there thinking about those things, maybe your priorities are elsewhere. So you can see where we can worship many things. I love cars. I go to car shows, I have fun with them. I grew up in a family that loves cars and has always built cars. But it's easy for that car to become the focus of worship. If all you do is think about the car, and all you do is work on the car, and all those things, it can become something you worship. Several years ago, I was laid off from a really good paying job, and I was young, so I spent all my money on cars. That's what car guys do. They still do. No matter how old you are, if you like cars a lot, that's usually where all your money goes. I had to sell everything. I actually ended up having, at one point, because I was laid off for 6, 7, 8 months, I had this little $500 Blazer I bought, and I sold everything else, and I'm driving around this Blazer. If you've seen an 80s Blazer, think of the ugliest color you can find, and this was it. It was house paint tan. It was a little 2-door sport, though. It was a sporty tan. It's 4-wheel drive at least, so I could get around in the snow. But, house paint tan, 85 Blazer, paid $500 for it, and it wouldn't start when I bought it. My father-in-law owns an auto parts store, so it's like, okay, let's get battery, let's see if it'll start going through things. For several years, I didn't own anything that I would have been, proud to own as a car person. It was something that's like, but I learned through that time that, one, cars aren't that important. For most people, the majority of the people in this room even, cars are an object to get you from point A to point B, maybe as slow or as fast as you choose. If you're like me, maybe it's a little faster. If you're like other people, maybe a little slower. That's fine. But any object that we hold in reverence, with deep respect, we hold it with deep love. If you got a cell phone and I looked, the last things you were looking at was, if you're like me, I have like 5 or 6 windows open because I want to, don't forget to buy this, or don't forget to do this later. Half of it's church stuff, one of them's football, and 1 or 2 of them is probably car stuff that I'm like, I need to make sure I check this. And if I look through your internet history on your phone, because that's what we carry, or your computer, or whatever you search through, what would be the majority of what you search through? Is that something that you deeply love and respect and you spend all your time on more than what God is? Is it something you would be proud of? Are you one of those people that you don't want me to see your internet history? What do you worship? Because worship is not any of those things. Worship is not supposed to be the affection for any of these. Worship is meant for God, and we were actually made to worship. And that's what the worship is, the proper response to how incredible and awesome God is. He's, as the scripture said, He is there. He is the power. And we look at Him with reverence and awe. We're coming up on 4th of July. Surprisingly, I know, but it's only like a month and a week away now. So we're coming up on 4th of July. What do you do when you watch fireworks, right? It's that ooh, ah, right? That ah. That's what it's talking about. It's that look. But I don't think we look at God the same way most of the time. We don't look at Him as a consuming fire. Like, a consuming fire is something that, if you've ever seen, like, I was in Florida, and it was one of the wildfires they had, and just the destruction. But fire also can be a good thing. Some of the Old Testament laws, something that they had to do is they had to burn the fields every 7 years. They're supposed to. And if you're a farmer or you have any farming history, you know that if you burn the field every 7 years, like it says you're supposed to scripturally, it actually replenishes the ground with nutrients. If you're working with steel or gold or iron, any of those things, fire refines it. It makes it stronger. It makes it better. But a lot of times we don't want fire. We want warm. I don't want to be cold. I don't want to be hot. Like next week it's supposed to be really hot. I don't want to be that hot. Can I find somewhere in the middle ground? And that's usually what we go for. Because when we're at church and during the time that we typically would call worship during the music, you don't want the fire that people look at you during, right? You don't want to be the one standing there and shouting and dancing around and whatever. You don't want people looking at you because you got your face paint on for church. You don't want to be out there tailgating before the service. Like, these are things that we don't want to do because how will people look at you? But worship is the proper response to how incredible and awesome God is. If we look at God's power, His might, and we look at who God is, because if we really think about it, everything we see was created by God. The ground, the grass, the sky, the universe, the planets, people, even the people you don't like were still created by God. The people you really do like were created by God. But if we look at how awesome and how incredible God is, we will see what worship is. Worship is focusing on Him and not everything else. Worship can be done with music. It can be done in the quiet. Worship can be done while you're doing other things. It's finding how you worship and what worship is, how it's defined best to you. Because some of us will worship more to music. Some of us will worship more through prayer. Some of us will worship more through action. I serve God. I want to please God. And it's not that we're defined by our works, but sometimes that's how we see worship. It's serving. Because and the way you can tell the way you look at it is how do you treat your significant other. If you have a spouse or girlfriend, boyfriend, whatever you have, how do you treat them? What is the way that means the most impactful thing? If it's service, acts of service, Kristen, it's a 5 love languages. Her love language is the worst one for a pastor's wife, and that is quality time. That's the uninterrupted, cell phones away. We try to have an hour a day where there's no cell phone use. I challenge any of you to try it. If you're cell phone addicted like most people, try it. You'll catch yourself doing this. It's my phone. Sitting there on the couch like, I don't know what I did with it. It's under the pillows, and you're looking around, it's in the other room. But find how you worship. If it's through music, worship God through music. Don't be ashamed of how you worship. If people look at you funny, that's fine. People look at me funny all the time. It's normal. It's okay. If you're passionate about something, you'll show it. You'll show it through worship. You'll show it through your actions. You'll show it through what you talk about, what you think about, what you're really focusing on in worship. As Kristen and Fernand come to do the last song, I challenge you guys to think about how you worship. If your worship is truly focusing on God, then continue worshiping that way. If your worship needs to maybe take a focus a little less off of the way something's played or the way something's performed, and more on who God is and how He's talking to us through the songs. Focus there. But worship is not as complicated as we make it. Worship is simply the proper response to how incredible and awesome God is. I ask if everyone will stand with me